If you haven't had déjà vu before, I wouldn't know how to explain this to you. I don't know anyone who hasn't had déjà vu. Over there, in my kitchen, I looked and lost track of time. Through the veil, the green ivy garland curtain, I noticed a teapot. It wasn't special to me or anything, but it was my teapot. My only teapot. Tony keeps saying it's actually a kettle, but I'm pretty sure I'm just going to keep calling it a teapot. I get the difference, don't get me wrong, but I like the way the word teapot rolls off my tongue. The ivy moved slowly with the small rustlings of air, and the sparkle briefly glistened on and off in my peripheral vision, giving me a small clue that we occupied the same space, that we existed at the same time. I became entranced. I beheld it long enough that my eyes might have turned gray, then silver, and I would never know. A perfect match for the once old trinket. There were 2 small circular patterns that wrapped along the top of the otherwise plain teapot, separated by both sides of the handle, and a round groove on the lid. The groove either marked the direction the lid faced on the pot, or it was a subtle locking mechanism, or maybe both. The teapot gave me a comfortable feeling in the thrift store when I held it, as if it could have been mine my whole life, and it would have been obvious that this trinket had always been there before. I just didn't notice until now. Damn, was it worse for wear though? Only hints of silver glistened through the mostly rotten pot. Somehow, that made it more charming to me. There was an eternity of lost memories hidden just below the surface under the rustic decay. It was of thrift store quality, but I knew it could have been polished and made gloriously anew. It was likely silver in color only. Being of thrift store quality, it was probably just aluminum. It was really rusty looking for aluminum though. Did aluminum rust? I really thought it didn't. It sure was sturdy looking though, despite the corrosion present all over. You just never knew what would be at the thrift store, happily awaiting the day it left the realm of the forgotten. The delightful surprise, plus the value you get for paying so little, was why my local thrift was my reason for living at a certain point. There were 2 men at the thrift store, both behind the counter as I made my selection. I guess the owner was training a new employee, or maybe had a friend come to visit. One had a chipper attitude, as though he just won a stack of cash for free. He was the one I was used to seeing here. The other man seemed very serious, almost grim. as though he yearned to finish some long-awaited task. Their yin-yang resemblance was bizarre, but the thrift store is always full of bizarre surprises. Just another reason to love the thrift store. I always find awfully coincident things occurring at the thrift store, including meeting weird and quirky people to match the weird and quirky things they sell. The small cleaning kit I'll be using soon came from the thrift shop too. I couldn't wait to clean this bad boy up. The rusty stains peeled off, slowly revealing the previously mentioned circular patterns. I don't remember exactly when it happened, but its long-awaited cleansing was quite satisfying. Maybe it was a couple weeks ago? It might have been Sunday of last week. Something has been bugging me though. Even when I'm busy, even when I have work to get done, videos to make, paintings to paint, chores to get done, my mind keeps drifting back to this teapot. 2 days ago, I picked the teapot up to make my first brew, to christen this newly polished knight back into the legendary society of warm beverage makers that only teapots, coffee pots, and their related kin dwell within. Despite that joyous event, I couldn't shake the chills until my first sip. And by chills, I don't mean the pleasant kind. Waiting for the brew might have been the longest 10 minutes of my life. Or perhaps I'm making an exaggeration of it all, just because I still can't believe what happened to me. As the water began to warm, I held the lid, admiring its humble sheen, and the sight hit me silently, like an assassin, or like a fortune teller who never falters, who is never wrong. Edged along the inner bottom of the lid, slightly hidden by the inner bowl of the lid, was a name. A longer name. A familiar name. And I couldn't believe my eyes. I looked down at the pot, picking it up just as the water plipped and plopped with baby bubbles, transitioning from simmer to boil. Along the top edge of the pot, etched in the bubble of the groove, was not just a mere indentation. There was a name, matching the name on the lid, the exact same name, in the exact same spot, as it likely had always been. Christian Ashton Garcia. My name was on the teapot. I just never noticed until now. I set each piece to dry after rinsing them off and didn't touch them for a few days until boiling that water. What does it mean? I thought to myself, struck to stone in my stance, solemnly petrified and weak-legged, but too shocked to break my stare. 2 days later, I'm still mesmerized. I'm losing my mind. I can't even write the script for this video. I can't paint any canvases. And for the life of me, I can't let go of this teapot. I stood up. I had to get to the bottom of this. I examined the pot in its entirety, inside and out, with my phone flashlight and a magnifying glass. The pattern on top was intricate. It looked like metallic lace and was beautiful, sure. It really didn't mean much, though. Now, observing it more thoroughly, I realized that lace wasn't the best way to describe the pattern. Lace sounded elegant, and this doesn't really describe the pattern very well. Instead, each shape seemed to be carved into the teapot. Primitive might have been a better word for it. The carving looked primitive. Something about the scratches, though, felt enticing. As if the pattern and the creator of such pattern were as old as time itself. They might be primitive, sure. But whatever artist did this, he gave me the feeling that his simple style was both primitive but everlasting. Archaic, yet eternal. The pattern made me feel as though I was staring into the infinite depths of whatever divine being created the universe, assuming there was one. There was a larger set of shapes that stood out. Within the web, there were thicker strands of metal than others, tripling around on itself, almost like a biohazard sign. These larger strands formed a more recognizable shape, if you could call it that. It wound in 3 loops, as if it were 3 circles, just more pointed on the outside. The other side was more elegant looking. Inside the second pattern, there were 2 of the same biohazard shapes flipped onto one another, making 6 loops. This shape was more aesthetically interesting, but it was too crisp. My eyes kept pulling back to the other side of the teapot, to the 3 loops. These 3 strands seemed connected in some way beyond what could be understood by merely looking unknowingly at the shape. The shape was interesting and familiar, and also terrifying. It seemed larger than life, but also smaller than life. The shape gave off an authenticity that gave onlookers a primordial reaction from deep within. It reminded me of Celtic drawings I studied back in art school, but somehow very different. As I peered into the shape, I felt as though I was in an infinitesimally small loop, in an endless, larger cycle. But within this cycle, I was isolated, trapped within a knot, unable to break free from the shackles and experience anything outside of its overpowering reign. In that moment, it was as though I had seen this silver teapot before. Déjà vu. I can't get it out of my head now. Just how did it have my name on it before I even found it. I feel I'm crazy, but deep down, I also don't believe that. This teapot and I have been acquainted before. Either in this time or another. Or either in this life or another. Or either in this universe or another. This teapot and I were meant to find each other. This teapot and I were meant to find each other. And I'll never believe anything else.